In the Edge Company laboratory, two scientists, Tucker and Marsley, conduct experiments to create the serum of invincibility using a tomato. Once ready, the pair decide to test it and throw the tomato against the wall, but it is completely crushed. The scientists are frustrated with the result, but promise to continue their work until they develop the perfect serum. The next morning, at a pizzeria, young Matt Burns is finishing preparing a pizza, but ends up dropping everything on the floor. His mother, Mrs. Burns, is furious, as this is the second pizza ruined this week and they won't have time to make another one. Because of this, she says she will deduct the cost from Matt's salary, but the young man begs his mother not to do so, as he needs the money. She then promises not to deduct it, but Matt must wear the pizza man costume and attract customers, as his late father used to do. The young man is then forced to go out in the costume, only to be humiliated by Todd, a popular college student, who drives past the pizzeria in his convertible. With him is his girlfriend Susan, for whom Matt has a secret crush, but never had the courage to confess. After this humiliation, the young man thinks about giving up, but Mrs. Burns tells him that in the past, Matt's father wore the costume with pride to support his family. This makes him feel guilty, and he keeps the pizza man costume for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, at the Edge lab, the two scientists return to the lab when they realize that the crushed tomato has been mysteriously restored. Unable to believe it, Professor Tucker throws the tomato once more, and before his eyes, the fruit regenerates itself. He has finally discovered the formula for a serum that can make tomatoes indestructible, and he plans to test it on humans soon. Far away, Matt finishes his shift at the pizzeria and heads to another class at college. However, in addition to not liking his job, the young man can't stay awake during Professor Tucker's chemistry class. When it's time to leave, the scientist wakes Matt up, telling him that he needs to stay focused if he wants to be a great researcher in the future. Although he is intelligent, Matt does not believe he has a promising future, as his life consists of taking care of the pizzeria with his mother. Still, Professor Tucker asks the young man to bring a pizza to the lab because he wants to show him his new creation. Matt accepts, and after leaving college, he returns to work at the pizzeria, making deliveries throughout the city. One of his customers is Stan Lee himself, who picks up his order at his Marvel office. He notices that Matt is discouraged, and in addition to letting the young man keep the change, Stan advises him not to give up, because before becoming a comic book legend, he worked as an obituary writer. This motivates Matt, and he thanks the great Stan Lee for his life advice. Back at the Edge lab, the company's owner, Mr. Criswell, talks to the two scientists and asks for results. Professor Tucker then shows him a tomato and asks him to crush it with all his strength. When he does so, the tomato disintegrates, but in a matter of seconds, it returns to its normal shape. The scientists then reveal that they have created the serum of invincibility, capable of regenerating any object that suffers physical trauma. Professor Tucker believes that this serum can be used on humans, and with it, various diseases can be cured. Mr. Criswell is so pleased with the result that he intends to sell the idea to the United States Army. However, the professor is not happy about this, as he developed the serum to help people, not as a weapon of war, and intends to thwart his boss's plans. Elsewhere in the city, Matt continues his work until it is time for his last delivery to Professor Tucker's laboratory. What he does not suspect is that John Kreider, Mr. Criswell's private security guard, has been sent with a team of snipers to steal the scientist's experiment. As soon as Matt delivers the pizza to Professor Tucker, the two are held up by the group, who demand the serum and the indestructible tomato. The scientist refuses, but Marsley hands everything over, revealing that he is also involved in this scheme, along with Mr. Criswell. The group then leaves, but on the way, Marsley ends up dropping the tomato on the floor. He waits for the fruit to regenerate, but the doctor realizes that his colleague has switched the tomatoes without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, Professor Tucker takes the real tomato, along with a syringe, and tries to escape the building with Matt. However, they encounter the snipers, who fire their weapons at them, hitting the professor and grazing Matt's shoulder. Despite this, they manage to reach the roof, where Tucker applies the compound, containing a type of catalyst, to the young man. He then tells Matt to eat the tomato, saying that it will increase his strength and that he should use it to do good. Finally, the doctor confronts Kreider and the gunman, who demand the real tomato in exchange for his life. However, Tucker takes a bottle of nitroglycerin out of his pocket and shoots it on the ground, causing an explosion that stuns the group. Unfortunately, the professor does not survive his injuries and loses his life in front of Matt. Furious, the young man decides to eat the tomato, and Kreider tries to stop him, but in the middle of the confrontation, the man ends up knocking Matt off the top of the building. Despite the fall, the young man gets up as if nothing had happened and drives away in his car. During the escape, Matt begins to feel ill and loses consciousness, stopping the car in the middle of the sidewalk. Luckily, he ends up parking near Susan's house, who, seeing him in that situation, invites him in. While she goes to get some water, Todd shows up and asks what Matt is doing there, since he didn't invite him to the party at his house. The young man tries to explain himself, but Todd tries to force him out and even punches Matt, but ends up hurting his own hand. His friends rush to help Todd, but Matt easily defeats them, throwing one of them against the ping-pong table. After that, the young man runs away and returns home, but the effect of the tomato continues to affect him, and he faints on the couch. The next day, Matt goes to have breakfast with his mother, but first he decides to test whether the tomato he ate really gave him powers. His first test is to touch the stove with his hand, and when he does so, he feels no pain. Then the young man tries to move the car using only his hands, and to his surprise, he manages to lift it without any difficulty, proving that Professor Tucker was telling the truth. Later, Matt returns to the pizzeria, where he sees the news on TV about his teacher's perishment. To make matters worse, Kreider and his men show up at the pizzeria and talk to Mrs. Burns, demanding to know where her son is. Seeing that none of them are police officers, she tells them all to leave, as they will not enter her kitchen without a warrant. Kreider insists on entering, but Mrs. Burns attacks the man by surprise with her baseball bat. However, Kreider's henchmen point their guns at the pizzeria owner and order her to tell them where her son is. Inside the kitchen, Matt sees everything, and to save his mother, he goes to get his father's old costume. Seconds later, the group storms into the kitchen, taking Mrs. Burns with them, when suddenly one of the gunmen is thrown away. Looking back, they come across Matt in costume, and the young man introduces himself as a superhero Power Man. Kreider and his men laugh at the young man, saying he's just a pizza delivery young man and telling him to surrender without resistance. However, Matt uses his strength to attack them all, and even with the gunman firing at him, the bullets do not harm him. After defeating the henchman, he confronts Kreider, who demands that the young man come with him to the lab. However, Matt is still furious over the professor's perishment and pushes the man against the cabinet, but in doing so, Kreider slips toward the oven, burning half of his face. Desperate, he calls his men to flee and rushes to the doctor to treat his burns. After the confrontation, Matt takes his mother straight to the hospital, and minutes later, Mrs. Burns wakes up and asks her son what happened. He then reveals the incident in the lab when he went to deliver the pizza to Professor Tucker. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Burns decides it is best to keep the shop closed until everything is resolved, and tells him that while she was unconscious, she had a dream about her husband. She saw him dressed in the pizza man costume, using his powers to save her from the criminals. Upon hearing this, Matt decides to carry on his father's legacy and assume the identity of Pizza Man, promising to use his powers to save people. Nearby, in another hospital room, Kreider has his face bandaged after suffering burns in the oven. The doctor examines him and says that he will be able to leave soon, but he will need some skin grafts to restore part of his face. Kreider then looks at himself in the mirror and is so furious at having been destroyed by Pizza Man that he swears revenge against the superhero. Unaware of what is happening, Matt goes to close the pizzeria while his mother is being treated, when Detective Moser shows up and asks him to come to the police station. Once there, the detective shows him the security camera footage of the moment Mrs. Burns was attacked by the group. He also shows him the masked man who confronted the criminals and suspects that Matt is the Pizza Man. However, the young man keeps his identity a secret, saying he would not be able to confront an armed group and carry his mother in his arms to the hospital. The detective accepts his answer but warns the young man that he will continue investigating to find out who Pizza Man is. After leaving the police station, Matt goes to the cemetery to pay his last respects to Professor Tucker. There, he meets Susan again and apologizes for the incident at the party when he confronted Todd and his friends. The young woman, however, says he doesn't need to apologize, as she heard from a friend that her boyfriend was the one who started the fight. In addition, the relationship wasn't going well, and she broke up with Todd, which made Matt very happy. The two continue talking while far away. Mr. Criswell discusses with Professor Marsley how to recover the invincibility serum. However, in the middle of the meeting, Kreider appears with his face destroyed and announces that he will steal Pizza Man's powers for himself. In addition, he says he will be the new head of Edge, as he is tired of obeying Mr. Criswell's orders. Upon hearing this, his boss says he has gone mad, but Kreider proves his words by pulling out his guns and shooting Criswell. After eliminating his boss, the man sits in the chair and names himself the new leader of the company, adopting the name Big Cheese. Now, he demands that Professor Marsley find a way to extract the serum from Pizza Man's body so that he can replicate the formula and use it on himself. The scientist says that, thanks to his research, he has discovered Pizza Man's weakness: cigarette smoke. Thanks to a pathogen found in tobacco leaves, the smoke affects the composition of the tomatoes, thereby neutralizing the superhero's powers. Big Cheese is pleased to hear this and orders his men to turn the smoke into a weapon so they can capture Pizza Man. With everything ready, the villain sets off with his snipers to the college where Matt studies. At that moment, the young man is in chemistry class with the substitute teacher when he starts to feel sick and goes to the bathroom. Shortly after, Big Cheese and his men invade the college and threaten the teacher and students with their weapons, demanding to know where Matt is. Susan quickly sends a text message, telling the young man that a suspicious group is after him. Matt then runs to the nearest bathroom and dresses up as Pizza Man, ready to save Susan and his classmates from the criminals. Meanwhile, Big Cheese doesn't see the young man in the room, but finds his notebook containing love messages to Susan. Seeing that the girl is in the room, he decides to take her prisoner to lure Matt into a trap. The group then runs away with the girl through the hallways, but Pizza Man shows up and tells Big Cheese to leave Susan alone. However, the guy tells his men to spray cigarette smoke, and as Professor Marsley predicted, Matt ends up losing his powers. With Pizza Man lying on the floor, Big Cheese orders them to extract the serum from his body. After that, he orders his henchmen to eliminate the young man, but before he can, classes end and students begin to gather in the hallways. Big Cheese then leaves with Susan and orders his henchmen to finish the job. However, as soon as the smoke clears, Pizza Man regains his powers and knocks the man down with a single blow. He then runs to save Susan, but arrives too late, and the villain takes her back to the Edge base. After leaving the girl tied up in the company's laboratory, Big Cheese goes to a meeting with shareholders, who demand to know if the serum experiment has been completed. Then, with the help of Professor Marsley, the director shows them the blood he collected from Matt, containing the chemical compound. With that, Big Cheese uses a small sample on himself, which makes the burns on his face disappear completely. However, seconds later, they return, proving that they still need to synthesize the serum to replicate it completely. Still, the demonstration is enough for the shareholders, who promise to finance the project if they can complete the experiment. The meeting continues, and outside the building, Matt has just arrived and is preparing to save Susan. However, he still has to get past Edge's security guards, so he pretends to be delivering a pizza to the company's director. His plan works, and the guard lets him through, with Matt wearing his Pizza Man costume inside the elevator. As soon as he arrives at Big Cheese's office, the young man advances toward him, and using his strength, he demands to know where Susan is. The villain is not intimidated and says he has a truce proposal, promising to hand over the girl if Matt lets him collect more samples of his blood. Concerned about Susan, the young man accepts the deal, but Big Cheese seizes the chance, lights a cigar, and blows smoke in Pizza Man's face. Because of the pathogen, the young man loses his powers and is forcibly taken to the secret laboratory. When he wakes up, Matt finds himself strapped to a stretcher, and Big Cheese says he will extract more samples of his blood to create a synthetic version of the invincibility serum. However, the villain does not intend to leave any witnesses, so he orders Professor Marsley to give the young man a lethal substance. Desperate, Matt asks them to let Susan go, but again, Big Cheese warns that he cannot leave any loose ends. Finally, Professor Marsley collects the blood sample and prepares to administer the lethal substance. This seems to be the end of Pizza Man, but 3 armed police officers appear in the laboratory and order everyone to surrender. It is then revealed that, before storming the building, Matt had called Detective Moser for help. Thanks to this, the police managed to arrive in time, and Matt is saved before it was too late. However, the villain has no intention of giving up, and a shootout begins inside the lab. Despite this, the police manage to gain the upper hand and set out to rescue the hostages, while Big Cheese and Professor Marsley flee to hide inside the building. In the midst of the shootout, Detective Moser manages to free Matt from the stretcher and takes him to safety in his car, alongside Susan. Soon after, he orders his team to go after the criminals, with 2 of the officers finding Professor Marsley in the lab. Using Pizza Man's blood sample, the scientist uses the formula and believes that very soon he will be invincible. However, the police officers knock the man down with a taser, proving that the formula did not work. The man is then taken away by the authorities, but Big Cheese remains, and he starts shooting at the police officers in his office. From inside the car, Matt and Susan hear everything on the radio, and the young man says he needs to help the police fight Big Cheese. Before that, he punches himself to see if his powers have returned, but realizes that the effects of the smoke are still in his system. Despite this, the young man is determined to do the right thing, and even without his powers, he dresses up as Pizza Man and runs towards the building. Seconds later, the young man reaches the office floor, but ends up being shot in the arm by Big Cheese. The police quickly help the hero, but the villain takes advantage of their distraction and flees toward the roof. Even though he's hurt, Pizza Man doesn't give up and goes after the villain, who tries to escape by jumping from one building to another. The hero tries to do the same, but he can't get the jump right and ends up hanging from the edge of the building. With Pizza Man completely defenseless, Big Cheese decides to finish off the hero and starts pressing on the wound on his arm. Luckily, Susan and Detective Moser arrive in time, and the cop shoots at Big Cheese, who manages to dodge the bullet. The villain then runs towards his car, but Pizza Man gets up once again and goes after him. Upon reaching the parking lot, the hero jumps over the car, with Big Cheese stepping on the gas and shooting towards the ceiling. Pizza Man manages to dodge the shots, but the villain slams on the brakes, throwing the hero out of the car. Seeing the young man lying on the ground, Big Cheese accelerates the car toward him. But again, Detective Moser saves the hero, using his patrol car to protect him. Despite his efforts, the villain gets out of the car, points his gun at the detective, and pulls Susan out of the car. He then takes her to a pizza dough factory with Pizza Man following them. Upon entering the factory, the hero sees Susan tied to a conveyor belt, which in a few seconds will push her toward a huge grinder. With no time to lose, Pizza Man tries to deactivate the machine, but his powers return, and he ends up breaking the mechanism with his strength. With Susan about to fall into the grinder, Pizza Man runs towards the conveyor belt and pulls the girl out at the last second, saving her life. Now, all that remains is to face Big Cheese one last time, and the hero finds him in the factory warehouse with nowhere to run. Big Cheese tries to convince him to join him because together, the two can create new doses of the serum and make a lot of money. However, the hero refuses, saying that he will follow Professor Tucker's teachings and use his powers to do good. Upon hearing this, the villain tries to resist, but Pizza Man fights back and pushes him away. However, Big Cheese is thrown toward another conveyor belt and begins to be pulled toward a huge freezer. The hero quickly runs to save him, but doesn't make it in time, and the villain is frozen in a block of ice. Finally, the battle is over, and Detective Moser congratulates Pizza Man for saving Susan's life and defeating the criminals. Matt then reveals his identity to the detective, who is surprised to see the young man, but advises him to leave crime fighting to the authorities. Finally, Matt takes Susan back home and finally declares his feelings to the girl, who responds with a kiss. However, the encounter is interrupted when Matt sees a criminal trying to steal a car just ahead. He then says goodbye to his girlfriend and goes once again to fight crime as the superhero known as Pizza Man. Everything ended well for Matt, but a new threat looms when Professor Marsley begins to feel ill inside the police car. It seems that the serum he used is having an abnormal effect on his body, and very soon Pizza Man will have a new archenemy to face.